Elias was a young man of average stature, with calloused hands that spoke of years spent working with wood and a quiet demeanor that had always set him apart. Born to a humble farmer's family in the village of Alderstead, he grew up surrounded by simple things: weathered fences, sturdy barns, and a modest home. But even as a boy, Elias had an eye for detail. While other children ran in the fields or played by the river, he would sit under the shade of the old elm tree, carving small animals from scraps of wood left behind in his father's shed. His father, a hard-working man who believed in the dignity of labor, noticed his son's budding talent. "Elias," he would say, "a strong hand and a keen eye will take you far. But remember, a master's work speaks louder than his voice." Elias took those words to heart. When he turned 15, he began apprenticing with an old carpenter in the village named Master Dren. Dren was known for his incredible craftsmanship, though his shop was small and unassuming. His work never bore a signature, nor did he seek to market himself beyond the village boundaries. And yet, his pieces seemed to possess a quiet magic, sturdy, yet graceful, practical, yet elegant. Under Dren's tutelage, Elias learned not only the techniques of shaping wood, but the philosophy that drove the craft. "Excellence is a whisper," Master Dren would say as they worked together on a farmhouse table. "It doesn't need to shout. If it's true, people will lean in close to hear it." Those words stayed with Elias as he honed his skills. By the time he reached his early 20s, he had earned a small workshop of his own. The space was nothing grand, just a timber-frame building with a sturdy workbench, a wall of tools, and an old pot-bellied stove that kept him warm on winter mornings. Yet it was enough. Elias didn't care about appearances or showmanship. He cared about his craft. Each piece of wood he touched, he treated with respect, coaxing beauty out of it rather than forcing it into shape. He understood that wood had a grain, a direction it wanted to go, and he worked with it rather than against it. What set Elias apart wasn't just his skill, but his attitude. While others in the village might rush a project to meet a deadline, or embellish their work to attract attention, Elias focused on the details. He made sure every joint was perfectly fitted, every surface sanded smooth, every edge gracefully finished. His workshop was filled not with the chatter of apprentices or the clang of heavy machinery, but with the rhythmic scrape of his plane, the steady beat of his mallet, and the occasional chirping of birds outside the open window. This silence wasn't a void. It was a space where creativity and focus could flourish. Elias rarely talked about his work, but the results spoke for themselves. A neighbor who ordered a simple chair would find it so comfortable, so balanced, that they would tell a friend. That friend would then come to Elias for a table, and before long, the entire village knew that if they wanted something made to last, they should go to Elias. His reputation grew not because he sought recognition, but because his work demanded it. Quietly, subtly, word spread beyond Alderstead, and travelers passing through the village would stop to see his wares. They would marvel at how someone so unassuming could produce furniture so remarkable. Elias never changed his approach. He continued to rise early, work methodically, and treat each project as if it were the most important one he'd ever done. In time, the quiet village of Alderstead became known as the home of a master craftsman, not because of advertisements or grand exhibitions, but because Elias's work whispered a simple truth: quality and dedication speak louder than any words. In those early days, as Elias closed up his workshop each night, he would look at the pieces he completed and feel a quiet satisfaction. He knew he was building something greater than just furniture. He was building trust, respect, and a reputation that would last far longer than any fleeting moment of fame. It was in those moments of solitude, as the sun dipped below the hills and the village lights began to flicker on, that Elias truly understood the meaning of working hard. In silence, tasks few said. Elias' life in the workshop followed a steady rhythm. His days were simple, structured, and filled with purpose. As word of his skill quietly spread, new customers came, eager to commission his furniture. Some traveled from neighboring villages, their carriages clattering into Alderstead's cobblestone streets, only to leave with wagons filled with Elias' finely crafted chairs, tables, and cabinets. Yet despite this growing interest, Elias kept his head down. He didn't feel the need to boast or expand beyond what he could manage alone. His work was his voice. But not everyone understood his methods. The growing demand for Elias' furniture drew the attention of a traveling merchant named Bram Collister. Bram was a flashy man, a salesman who thrived on spectacle. He wore a fine coat of green velvet, a feathered hat that bobbed as he walked, and a ring on nearly every finger. When he arrived in Alderstead, he immediately sought out Elias' workshop. Bram burst through the door one brisk autumn morning, startling Elias as he carefully beveled the edge of a walnut table. "Master Carpenter," Bram exclaimed, sweeping his hat off in an exaggerated bow. "I've heard whispers of your work from miles around. They say your hands are touched by the gods themselves." Elias set down his chisel and regarded Bram. With his usual calm, "I'm glad my work pleases people. How can I help you, sir?" "Help me," Bram laughed. "It's I who can help you. Imagine this, my good man. You and I, partners in a grand enterprise. I'll spread your name far and wide, have your pieces displayed in the finest halls of the city. Nobles, merchants, even the king himself will be dining at tables you crafted. You'll be rich beyond your wildest dreams." Bram pulled a rolled up parchment from his satchel and laid it on the workbench, covering Elias' tools. The document was filled with promises, a partnership contract that guaranteed Elias wealth and fame. In return, Bram demanded that Elias promote himself, attend city events, and publicly share his secrets of the trade to attract even more customers. Elias scanned the words carefully, his brow furrowing. "What do you think?" Bram asked, beaming. "Sign this, and you'll never have to worry about money again. You'll be the most famous carpenter in the land." Elias stepped back, his hands resting on the edge of the workbench. The offer was tempting. Bram was offering instant success. Elias could have all the materials he wanted, a larger workshop, and a steady flow of well-paying clients. But something about it felt wrong. He thought of Master Dren's words, "Excellence is a whisper. It doesn't need to shout." The thought of standing on a stage, proclaiming his skills, shouting for attention, it clashed with everything he believed in. He had always worked in silence, allowing his craft to speak for itself. Elias looked Bram in the eye and said, "I appreciate your offer truly, but I'm not interested." Bram's smile faltered. "Not interested? My dear boy, do you realize what you're turning down? Wealth, recognition, the finest life you could imagine." "I understand," Elias said firmly, "but I prefer to let my work speak for itself." Bram's face grew red. "Do you know how rare this opportunity is? Fame doesn't come to those who stay silent. If you won't take my offer, you'll regret it." Elias remained unmoved. "I'm grateful for your interest, but this is not the path I wish to take." Bram huffed, snatched up his parchment, and stormed out. The door slammed behind him, leaving Elias alone once more in his quiet workshop. He turned back to the walnut table, ran a hand over its smooth surface, and let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He knew he had made the right choice. The thought of chasing recognition, of letting noise overshadow his craft, felt like a burden he never wanted to carry. As the weeks passed, the village continued to grow quietly aware of Elias' skill. More customers came, not because of flashy advertisements or loud proclamations, but because they had heard from friends and neighbors about the quality of his work. The merchant's promises faded into memory, and Elias carried on as he always had, working hard in silence, trusting that his dedication would speak louder than any noise. What Elias learned was clear. Fame and fortune might come quickly to those who shout the loudest. But true success, the kind that lasts, comes from the quiet consistency of doing good work day after day. And so, with every piece he crafted, Elias reaffirmed his belief that the only sound he needed was the steady rhythm of his own tools. Years rolled by, and Elias' work continued to flourish. What had started as a quiet whisper in Alderstead had become a steady hum throughout the surrounding villages. Nobles from nearby estates sent messengers, eager to commission his furniture. Traders passing through town stopped to marvel at the craftsmanship of the tables and chairs displayed in the inn's dining room, each one bearing Elias' unmistakable touch. And still, Elias remained true to his principles, steadily working away, never boasting or seeking fame, letting his work carry his name instead of his words. Elias had always worked alone, but as the orders grew, he began to feel the need for help. Though reluctant at first, he eventually agreed to take on a single apprentice. Her name was Clara, a spirited young woman with a genuine love for woodworking. Though inexperienced, she had a keen eye and a steady hand, and Elias saw in her the same quiet determination that had guided him over the years. Clara quickly took to the craft, and her questions were frequent and thoughtful. One evening, as the workshop was bathed in the warm glow of oil lamps, she hesitated before speaking. "Master Elias," she began, her voice tinged with curiosity, "may I ask you something?" Elias looked up from the leg of a chair he was shaping. "Of course, Clara. What's on your mind?" "I understand the importance of working quietly, of letting our craft speak for itself," she said, her hands idly smoothing a scrap of wood. "But sometimes I wonder, how will the world know what we're capable of if we never tell them? Shouldn't we at least try to show people what we can do? Isn't that how we inspire others?" Elias rested the chair leg against the bench and thought for a moment. He knew Clara wasn't questioning the quality of the work they did. She was grappling with a deeper truth, one that he had wrestled with in his own way many years before. He leaned on the workbench, his face calm, his eyes steady. "Clara," he said, "there's a kind of strength that doesn't need to announce itself. Think of the roots of a tree. They're hidden beneath the soil, unseen by the world, but they're what hold the tree steady against the wind and rain. Without those roots, the tree would topple. That's what I aim for in my work. I want it to stand strong on its own, without me having to shout about it. If it's truly good, people will see it. They'll feel it." Clara nodded, but her brow was still furrowed. "But what about people who don't know the look? Don't they deserve to see what we're capable of?" Elias smiled faintly. "They'll find it in time. When someone discovers something of true quality, they tell others. That's the beauty of letting your work speak. It creates a ripple. The world will know, but it'll know because the work is good, not because we shouted it from the rooftops. And when that happens, the recognition will mean far more." She considered this for a while, and though she didn't respond immediately, Elias could see the thoughtfulness in her expression. He knew she would have to come to her own understanding, just as he had. Over the weeks that followed, Clara began to notice the truth of his words. Customers would walk into the workshop, not because they'd seen posters or heard announcements, but because they'd heard quiet praise from someone they trusted. Each satisfied customer carried a piece of Elias' reputation with them, spreading it not with noise, but with genuine admiration. Elias continued to teach Clara the intricacies of woodworking, but also the value of patience and humility. He showed her that working with care and attention meant that the furniture would last, and that lasting work would speak louder than any words ever could. As she grew more skilled, Clara found herself embracing the philosophy of letting the work be the voice. She didn't have to explain why her chair legs curved just so, or why her dovetail joints fit so precisely. Those who sat in her chairs would understand immediately. In time, Clara became a master in her own right. And though she still had questions, she began to see the strength in Elias' quiet approach. She saw that working hard in silence wasn't about hiding from the world. It was about building something so solid, so well-crafted, that the world couldn't help but notice. By the time Elias turned 50, the steady rhythm of his life had slowed slightly. The young carpenter who once labored alone in his small workshop was now a respected elder, whose guidance was sought by craftsmen from all over. His hair was streaked with silver, his hands more lined than before, but his touch was as steady as ever. If anything, the years had only deepened his wisdom. Both as a carpenter and as a teacher, Clara had grown into a fine craftswoman under Elias' tutelage. In fact, she had become known throughout the region for her own thoughtful, elegant designs. She no longer thought of Elias merely as her teacher. He was now her partner, her equal in craft and philosophy. Together, they mentored a handful of apprentices who had come to Alderstead to learn not just woodworking, but a way of life, a commitment to excellence, humility, and quiet perseverance. As the workshop hummed with activity one cool spring afternoon, Elias paused from planing a table edge to watch his apprentices. They worked with care, their tools moving in smooth, practiced motions. Clara was bent over her own project nearby, a chest carved with intricate details that told a story of forests and rivers. Elias felt a quiet pride as he observed the fruits of decades of effort, not just in the quality of the pieces being made, but in the character of the people creating them. One of the newer apprentices, a young man named Theo, broke the peaceful atmosphere. He set down his chisel and asked, "Master Elias, why have you never signed your work? Don't you want people to know it's yours?" The question hung in the air for a moment, and all heads turned toward Elias. He straightened, brushing sawdust from his apron, and replied in his usual measured tone, "If my work is truly good, then people will know it's mine without a name. A signature might make it easier to identify, but it also makes the work about me, not about the craft itself. I've always believed that when we let the quality of what we create speak for itself, we gain something much more lasting than fame." Theo frowned slightly, still unsure. "But wouldn't signing it ensure your legacy? Make sure you're remembered?" Elias smiled gently. A legacy isn't a name on a piece of wood. It's the way a well-made table feels to the family that gathers around it. It's the comfort of a chair that supports someone as they rest after a hard day's work. If what I've done is meaningful, it'll last. People will pass it on, not just in objects, but in stories, in respect. That's the kind of legacy that matters to me." Clara spoke up, her hands still at work as she glanced over. "And I'd say it's worked, hasn't it? People come here from miles away because they've heard of what we do, not because of a name carved on the bottom of a chair. They come because they trust the quality, the care, and the quiet pride that goes into everything we make." Elias nodded, pleased that Clara understood. In truth, his legacy was already clear. It was in the skill of his apprentices, the beauty of the pieces they created, and the values they upheld. And in a way, his legacy was also in the way the village itself had changed. Alderstead had grown into a place known for fine craftsmanship, its reputation built not on fanfare, but on generations of steady, silent work. As the years went on, Elias spent less time at the workbench and more time teaching, guiding, and reflecting. He never sought wealth or renown, but both had come in a quiet, understated way. His furniture continued to be passed down through families, each piece cherished not just for its utility, but for the story behind it. People would say, "This table was made by Elias," or "This chair is from Alderstead," and it was understood. No signature was needed. The work itself carried the name, the place, the philosophy. When Elias passed away in his late 60s, it was not with great fanfare, but with a simple service in the village he had always called home. His apprentices, now masters in their own right, stood quietly in the back of the small church, their hands folded, their hearts heavy yet full of gratitude. Clara, who had become the de facto leader of the workshop, remembered his teachings with clarity. She carried them forward, continuing to train new apprentices in the same spirit of quiet excellence. Elias' name never appeared in grand histories or etched in stone monuments, but that was never his aim. His legacy was alive in every well-crafted piece that bore the mark of care, in every student who adopted his philosophy, and in the generations of craftsmen and women who worked in silence, knowing that their dedication would speak louder than any words. In the end, Elias' life was Proof that the most enduring legacy is not the noise we make, but the lasting quality of what we leave behind.